Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. This is the Self-Control Show, and I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Here's your next episode. All right, today we are talking about dealing with overwhelm. And I've got this question from a few of my clients and several people on Instagram. So I figured this would be a great topic to talk about on a podcast. First, we're going to start off by defining what overwhelm is, then talk about what's actually going in your body and your nervous system as you're experiencing overwhelm. And then maybe a way to talk yourself through and walk yourself through the feelings of overwhelm. And then lastly, give you some open-ended questions and tips to start changing your relationship with the feeling of overwhelm. So let's start with what feeling overwhelm is. It can be described as, experiencing a sense of overpowering feeling in your mind with thoughts or emotions. And then it often arises when you feel like you have too much to handle and are unsure of how to manage or navigate through it. And as always, please watch episode 3 at the start before any of these episodes, just because it's going to give you really good foundations for what self-control is and talk about your nervous system and all that good stuff. And it'll help you better understand this stuff. So what is actually happening in your body and your nervous system as you're experiencing overwhelm? Well, overwhelm, as it pertains to your nervous system and the functionings that's going on, is typically an experience of too much yellow, which is sympathetic energy. And that can be felt as and seen as too much challenge without enough support, or prolonged stress or prolonged challenge without enough energy or physical capacity to deal with the demand for whatever it is that you have the task at hand. And a good example of this is, somebody asks you to do something that's pretty hard to do. And it's like, what is that feeling that you get when you start thinking of all the things that you have to do this task? Maybe it's just like one more thing. You didn't get that much sleep the night before. You're fighting with your spouse, and then you get asked to do this thing. And for me, that feeling just feels like all of a sudden I need to take a nap, right? And a lot of people, I think, can get frustrated by the feeling of overwhelm. And quite honestly, part of what I'm going to do on this podcast is hopefully shift your idea and your relationship with that response, because really what it is a perfectly normal response that your body has to confrontation with something that is very challenging. When you have too much yellow and too much sympathetic energy in your nervous system, in your body for too long, naturally what happens is that is perceived as not being safe, and you want to shift down into red or dorsal. And that's the feeling of all of a sudden you just feel like all your energy's gone. It's your nervous system kicking you from yellow to red, and you want to immobilize, you want to shut down, you want to go take a nap, you want to go dissociate, numb, all the things. So again, just knowing that overwhelm is just a normal response that everybody is going to experience no matter what in your life. Again, there's a bit of shame release in that. And a lot of times what's going on in your body is experiencing too much yellow and it's being kicked down into red. So now that we have an understanding of what's going on in your body, how would you walk yourself through it? So typically what I would do with a client is that presented me with the feeling of overwhelmed is say, okay. So a part of you is feeling overwhelmed. Where do you feel that overwhelm in your body? Because a lot of times when you have an experience, it shows in 3 ways. You have a physical sensation. There are emotions that correlate to those physical sensations, and then thoughts that come from physical sensations and the emotions. They stem a bunch of thoughts. And again, going back to episode 3, this is like having the yellow lens on of sympathetic energy. And what's important about figuring out where this feeling of overwhelm stems from in your body is it allows you to tune in to that feeling much quicker. So, once you start getting those initial feelings of overwhelmed, you can start realizing that that trigger has wisdom and start doing something differently about it than what you're currently doing. So again, where do you feel that feeling in your body? Is this feeling a new feeling, or is this something that is familiar? For a lot of my clients, and myself included, these feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, stress, anger, fear, etc. aren't new feelings, right? They've been around us for sometimes, years, tens of years. So try to ask yourself how old this feeling feels. How old does this feeling think you are? You might be surprised by that answer, because one of the things that happens is a lot of how we deal with certain emotions, situations, difficult navigation periods or situations in our life get shaped from what happens to us early on in our life. And why that is because a lot of these things we come across when our brains aren't fully developed yet. In other words, we don't have a prefrontal cortex. The mainframe executive functioning of our brain isn't fully developed, which is, I'm sure, which is why, teenagers and kids do crazy dumb things. It's sometimes we're like, God, crazy dumb teenager. Why do they do such stupid things? It's well, because literally their brain is not fully formed yet. I digress. Why this is important is because when we have a situation where we experience too much challenge or too much yellow and we're younger and we don't have appropriate context by maybe a caretaker or a teacher or a mom or a dad to help us through these things, we develop certain responses based on what we know at the time. And then we kind of get frozen in time whenever that sort of feeling or emotion comes up in the future. So you could be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, but having a reaction to a certain emotion or a situation that a teenager or a kid would have because you haven't fully integrated the past yet. Okay. And surprisingly, when you figure out how old that emotion is, you can actually ask it, what does it feel like to be overwhelmed? And let it talk. Let it, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel when you ask that part what it feels like to be overwhelmed? Listen to yourself. And this might be a little woo-woo. This might seem a little weird, but just bear with me, okay? Then you can ask, what do you need in order to relax a little bit? What do you need in order to move forward? I'm here, and listen to yourself with compassionate curiosity, because these feelings have real wisdom for you. And you might be surprised as to what those feelings and emotions say back. And once you hear what you need and what you need to see moving forward to kind of relax and maybe not feel so overwhelmed, it is then your job to give yourself those things from that day forward. Okay, check in with yourself. If you know that you need more sleep, if you know that you need to ask for help, if you know that you need to have a difficult conversation or you need to do X, Y, and Z, those are things that you now have the awareness of that you are responsible for. So, and once you are able to start tuning into this stuff, it's like a huge deal, because all of a sudden you can start basically reparenting yourself. You're bringing the green part, your prefrontal cortex, to this stress, to this yellow, and all your major functioning can come back online to help you problem solve through these difficult feelings and emotions. So that would be a way to talk yourself through it. And then lastly, what are ways that you can start shifting your relationship to overwhelm? Well, one of the best things to do is to kind of take inventory of your life to where maybe you're saying yes when you really mean to say no. And this is so common for so many people because we all have kind of like misconception of, our hierarchies. In other words, like a lot of times we put other people before us, and we've grown up hearing that, hey, putting yourself first, that's selfish. Well, it is selfish, but the only sustainable hierarchy out there is putting yourself first. Okay? If you don't fill your cup up, if you don't give yourself what you need, if you don't, again, keep on giving yourself the proper nutrition, let's just say in this case, you're eventually going to lead to being overwhelmed and burning out. So that's one suggestion. Number two, ask for help. One of the more difficult things for people to do is asking for help. Doesn't matter what area of your life it is in, but asking for your help, taking tasks off your plate, especially if you're in, relationship, if you have roommates, if you live with other people and you feel like you're the one carrying the burden, it's a good idea to sit down and do like a task worksheet to see, okay, what chores do I do? What chores do you do? Here's where I really need help. I really need help here, here, and here. Asking for help is so huge. Doing self-check-ins each morning, especially when you get in touch with those feelings of overwhelm. Because a lot of times overwhelm comes from ignoring certain alarms that are going off within us over and over and over again until finally our body is like, F you. I'm going to shut you down until you listening to me. Are you knowingly taking on too much? So again, this kind of goes back to saying yes when you really mean no. Can you work on developing healthy boundaries? Knowing that it's okay to say no and that you're worthy and worth it. Also, delegating tasks, especially outside of your zone of genius. If there are things that just like you hate doing, especially if you're like an entrepreneur, business owner, can you find somebody else to do those tasks for you? Can you hire somebody else to do those tasks for you, or pay somebody to do those tasks for you? And then lastly, what I suggest, if you can't do any of those things, if there are certain tasks that you have to do that you don't like doing or that require a lot of physical energy, cognitive energy, or creative energy, do those things in the first part of your day. When you're feeling the most energized, when you have the most energy, don't leave until the end of the day, because that is just setting yourself up for failure. Because the two most draining things, the things that require the most amount of energy, number one is obviously physical exertion. But the other part is learning a new task or doing something that's cognitively challenging. Those are the things that require the most amount of energy. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you'd like more information on training with me, you can go to my website, jasonschnitzercoaching.com, book a free consultation. If you're interested in working one-on-one, I have 3-month programs where we work together for 3 months at a time to help get you your self-control back online. We deal with things like overwhelm, stress, anxiety, relationship stuff, physical goals, and we can work on things in ways to help build your wealth with regards to impulsivity, budget setting, all that good stuff. If you'd like my free guide to self-control, it'll be in the show notes. And as always, guys, if you have any ideas, please feel free to send those to me via social media. And thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. And I'll catch you next time.